Okay, here we go. Chapter 13, kind of our guided lecture notes, taking a look at what does it mean to be an American in the early 1800s. Now, I'll tell you right off the bat, Chapter 13, we're going to cover it down and dirty, lickety-split, right quick, just talking about a few things, and we're just going to kind of go through it so you can just follow along with your guided notes. So the War of 1812 is over. Now what? Now what do we do as a country? The war is over. And so what were some of the feelings that most Americans had following the end of the War of 1812? I just want you to think about that. Think about the war being over. We are no longer fighting Great Britain. What do most Americans feel? Excitement, happiness, patriotism, things like that. And then the president at the time, Monroe, he has a bit of a question. And that is simply isolationism or involvement. And following the War of 1812, what does Monroe choose? Obviously, we know now the Monroe Doctrine, don't come a knockin'. Monroe chooses isolationism, right? So here we have President Monroe. And we've also, known that he is our 5th president. I know you're wowed by the flashy animation. And he issues the Monroe Doctrine, which basically says, Europe, we run the show over here. Don't get up in the Kool-Aid without even knowing the flavor. Let us handle our business, and the Americas, North and South, are closed to colonization. Isolationism to the max. Moving on. The Monroe Doctrine. From there, we need to unite our nation in a land of differences, right? 2 out of every 3 Americans still live along the coast across the Mississippi River at the time. That is referred to as the frontier. And we start to see some regional stereotypes starting to develop, right? We have this New England northeastern region, we have this southern region, and then we have this western region. So 3 kind of regions developing and 3 types of stereotypes developing. All right. First, in the Northeast, we see that most Northeasterners, they're referred to as Yankees. No, we're not talking about that baseball team that cheats and buys their way to World Series titles. However, the term Yankees, some people despise them just as much as I despise the Yankees today. And they believe that if you lived in the Northeast, that you were interested in basically making money. You owned a business, you were involved in business, involved in manufacturing, and you were money hungry. Of course, we know a stereotype does not mean that all people feel that way. Oh, disease. Oh, excuse me. I apologize. But yes. Oh, one more, maybe? No? Oh, excuse me. I apologize. But yes, Northeast, you are money hungry. They believe that if you lived in the South, that you were plantation owners, that you were kind of gracious, kind of thankful, Southern charm, and that you were lazy because of slavery. And they believed that if you lived out in the West, adventure was where it was at. You were rugged, you were hardy, you were crude, which means not always acting proper. And so these were kind of our 3 regional stereotypes. So again, the West was viewed as cheap land and wild times. The Northeast was viewed as manufacturing, money, business, trade, and the South, of course, was viewed as slavery and cotton, which, presents a bit of an issue. You've got 3 distinct groups of people, all of them American, but different stereotypes, and you have to unite them together. We also see the development of some symbols and some values, right? Our national capital, of course, we know was burned to the ground by the British, so we decided to rebuild our capital as a source of national pride, rebuild the White House, and make these massive, fantastic buildings. Uncle Sam, the phrase Uncle Sam, referring to the federal government at the time, goes back to a guy named Sam Wilson, who helped to supply American troops during the War of 1812. And it was kind of, oh, here comes Uncle Sam. He's here to kind of help us out. And then it kind of evolved to take on the word for the government. Even today, when you hear the phrase Uncle Sam, we know that people refer to, when they say Uncle Sam, they're referring to the federal government. And some American values start to develop as well, where Americans become devoted to individualism and equality. As long as you weren't a Native American, you weren't a slave, or you weren't a woman. During the time, unfortunately, those values they weren't put on, especially the idea of equality wasn't really viewed in the lens of women, Native Americans, and slaves. All right, Monroe's presidency, referred to as the era of good feelings, right? Just like Miley, let's party it up in the USA. So we've got economic nationalism. Capitalism is the word we're looking for, and that is our system, our economic system that we still have today, where you think that people, they start businesses, businesses sell products, and businesses make money. Sometimes businesses fail, sometimes businesses are successful, but that is capitalism. That is what we have today. Henry Clay develops what is known as the American system, a plan for self-sufficiency, where he basically says we don't want to rely on other countries anymore, we need to be able to rely on ourselves. So the first part, establishing a protective tariff. Remember, a tariff is just simply a tax on imported goods, which then makes imported goods from Europe more expensive, so people will buy cheaper American-made goods. Establish a national bank to help with the sending up loans for businesses, and then also improve our transportation system. If we are to grow and if we are to be strong, we need to be well connected, right? So we start building canals like the one you see here. There are also mules. Check them out. All right, so we see our system of canals to kind of help connect the nation. Yes, right? I mean, if we're going to be growing west and spreading out west, we need a way to get goods, people, news, information back and forth from the East Coast, where most people live, kind of into more of the central USA. We also see the steam engine developed during this time by a man named Robert Fulton, able to move goods quickly upstream and even quicker downstream. Hey, how about those fancy animations, huh? Blowing your socks off right now. We're going to skip our mental health break. And judicial nationalism, kind of our last topic here. 2 Supreme Court cases. Remember the Supreme Court? They determine whether or not a law is constitutional, but they also settle any arguments between the states and the federal government or in between states. So there is a national bank that was created, and in the court case of McCullough versus Maryland, the state of Maryland wanted to tax the national bank. The Supreme Court says talk to the hand. The Supreme Court says the power to tax is the power to destroy. And if you can put a tax on the national bank, you could destroy the national bank, and a state should not or does not have the power to do that. Another case, 1834, Gibbons versus Ogden. 2 owners of steamships deals with shipping rights on a river in between New Jersey and New York. And the court says that any trade which comes between more than one state, so from New York to New Jersey, or New Jersey to New York, or Minnesota to Wisconsin, Wisconsin to Minnesota, they say that the federal government has the power to regulate that, not the states. So because it's involving more than one state, the national government gets involved. So this is kind of a new concept for the time. And that's pretty much it, right? There you have it. That is kind of part 1 of chapter 13, taking a look at economic nationalism, just kind of this era of good feelings and national pride. Hope you got your guide notes filled out. If you have any questions, talk to me in class.